Hello, welcome to Greenwood Holistic Health Group. Um, Today we were going to have a conversation about long COVID. Are there any particular causes and what are the common issues associated with it? So we're going to sort of kind of take it in turns, give you a brief outline from each of our directions where we see the likely problems leading into it and the issues, and maybe a little bit about how to get out as well. So brilliant to have you here. Let's get on, and let's start with Rainer. Are you happy to start us off here? What are the causes and issues associated with long COVID from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, more being a medical doctor and looking into immunology, I would say we have a strong immune system when our mitochondria are working well, when there's not a lot of silent inflammation going on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very often related, of course, to our state of nutrition, to our how many toxins we may have in our body. And that's not only chemicals, also mental or emotional toxins. So it's about the amount of stress that we are going through or have been going through. Do we already have developed any other chronic diseases that are run in the background? And particularly, I think about metabolic syndrome, which includes high blood pressure, that includes diabetes and overweight. And these are the known risk factors we have always read during that COVID time.
Mm.
And whatever happens when something invades our body, and that may be a toxin, that may be a virus, or even a physical or emotional stress that may happen to us, our cells react with making special proteins. And these are regulating proteins which support the immune system in being activated.
Mm-hmm.
And those proteins are partly part of the receptors on the cell surface of the immune cells, and they help to connect to those invading pathogens, and also to invaded or occupied other cells by viruses, what viruses do.
Mm-hmm.
So those immune cells will be easier able to destroy those cells. But if we have a chronic disease with an underlying chronic inflammation that always restricts the function of the mitochondria and creates a lot of free radicals, a lot of oxidative stress that may come from different kinds of toxins. That includes chemicals, it includes medication even.
So we already have this load on our
that,
system.
That also includes, for example, instabilities of the cervical or even the lumbar spine. So lots of things may play a role here. And at any time such silent inflammations are going on, this kind of what is called the heat shock response is not happening anymore. So those regulating, supporting proteins are not made anymore in the amount needed. And then when there is, and it may be not only COVID, it could also be a flu or another pathogen that may cause it. If another threat to the immune system or something that activates the immune system is happening, then the body will end in a less optimal state when the thing is over. So it will be hard to recover.
You mentioned silent inflammation, and we write in and explaining that this is inflammation that is within people's bodies, but they may not be aware of it. It may be asymptomatic. Is that what you mean by silent?
Yeah,
So people feel that they're well, but actually the stress levels mean that they're
it's
not actually fully well.
Yeah,
They're doing okay rather than
it's
fully well.
it's not really asymptomatic, but the symptoms people have are not related to inflammatory symptoms, because we all know this is heat and pain and swelling and reddening. But this kind of silent inflammation is just showing itself in terms of, I don't have enough energy, I've got some aches and pains here and there,
Bit of brain
and I feel
fog.
stiff, and my digestion is not really working. So then you have to watch after these things.
And very, very common. There are so many people who say they're well, but actually they're a little tired, they're a little achy, and you think actually you're not fully well.
Yeah.
So it's the whole process starts before you suffer from COVID. You're saying that we are susceptible when we don't have a fully well and fully balanced system, basically.
Right.
Brilliant. B, would you like to jump in and give us a little bit what sort of, in your mind, are the contributory factors to developing long COVID?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think Rainer's said a lot of it already in terms of, I mean, certainly any kind of post-viral fatigue. I know when I first got ill with post-viral fatigue back in 1996, I like many others, I was fit and well. But when I discovered naturopathy and learned about, the progress of disease, just like Rainer said, there's many symptoms that happen that you think they're normal. And I have many clients that come to me and, they might come to me for a particular thing, but that's become their normal. And they don't see it as even being ill or having a body that's out of balance necessarily. So for me, I mean, it started with dry skin. Now, many people might have dry skin and think, wow, my skin's just a bit dry, that's normal for me. But, if we're well hydrated, if our cells are getting the fluid that they need every day, then there should be no reason that people would have that symptom. So when I look back, for me, it was dry skin, and then it was allergies. And so obviously my immune system was out of balance. And many people wouldn't think, oh, I've got hay fever, but, there's my system's out of balance. They just take that as the norm, that, that's just something they've got. And I think this is the thing, that many people have things that are going on, like Rainer said, maybe a bit low in energy, or they get migraines or headaches, and that's their normal, and they just take some pills and think, well, that's fine, that's just part of life, but I'm fit and well. But really, any symptoms are a kind of indication that the body's out of balance. So for me, it's really kind of like looking back at that journey and trying to find, where have things gone out of balance? What was the diet like around that time? Were people hydrating well enough? We lose 4 pints of water every single day. And if we don't replace those 4 pints of water in the right way, and it's not just a case of, drinking any water and drinking it all in one go. There's actually a way to drink water, which kind of might sound a little bit strange. But I was just reaching for a bit of paper because I just wanted to demonstrate with a drawing that this is a really crude drawing. But these are our cells, right? And they don't actually look like that. I'm sure Ryan will. But we got 75 trillion or so of these things in our body, and they make our cells make our tissues make our organs make our systems make our body. And each one of those 75 trillion cells, they need certain things. They need good nutrients going in. They work with vitamins and minerals. And I speak to many people that are fit and well, but, hardly eat any vegetables, or, and
time bomb waiting to happen.
yeah, and you know, vegetables contain vitamins and minerals, and that each one of those 75 trillion cells need those vitamins and minerals to work. And this lovely kind of circle around the outside, that's your cell membrane. And you know, if we can intake things like damaged fat, when we heat certain fats, we can damage the structure of them. Things like crisps and biscuits and sat fats and all of these things that we know that aren't great, and that people that are fit and well may well eat, they're going to damage that cell membrane. They're going to coat that cell membrane so that nutrients can't get in as easily. They're going to stiffen the cell membrane. The cells can't communicate with each other because they communicate via this cell membrane. And Rainer talks about cell receptors where, you know, our hormones dock onto, and our, you know, these cell membranes are amazing. You know, they're important for our brain chemicals to work. Really crude drawing as well. But think of a cell receptor like an antenna, you know, and the hormones are going to dock onto that cell receptor. So I have many people that come to me where their hormones are out of balance, or they might have acne, or they might have, you know, menstrual problems, period pain, or PMS, and that's their normal. But again, all of these things are signs that the body is out of balance. And nutrition, you know, is all about putting the body back into balance. It's all about giving those 75 trillion cells everything they need to be in balance. But also what I do, because I'm a naturopathic nutritionist, I use naturopathic techniques to open up the routes of elimination in the body. So the body eliminates. I'm going to draw you another little drawing because I think it's good when people can see.
Art class.
Art class? No, really not. Very crude art. I failed my art GCSE, so you won't be surprised to hear that. How you can fail arts, I don't know, because I thought it was subjective. Still wounded, another trauma there. Patricia's trauma. So 75 trillion cells, this is how they get rid of their waste. So they dump it. This might be back to front, I'm not sure.
No, it's forward, perfect.
Okay, so the cells dump it into lymph, the lymph dumps it into blood, the liver cleans the blood, liver dumps waste into the bile dumps it into the small intestine dumps it into the large intestine. So that's how these cells get rid of their waste. I specialise in gut issues particularly, and how many people do I see that do not have the perfect poo? That's this bit, the large intestine. And, you know, people say to me, oh, this is my normal. I had a client say to me, I go to the toilet like maybe like every 3 days, but my doctor told me that was my normal. It's no, your body, you know, the perfect thing is to be able to go 3 times a day, you know.
Isn't it crazy that we have a health system that doesn't ever promote
aware
health?
of that. I know.
It purely does prescription and allows you to actually abuse and damage your body.
I mean, this is how we get our waste out, and we need to get that waste out for our immune system to work well, you know, otherwise we're kind of living in this toxic soup. And it's the environment that we create in our body, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical, that can create that kind of swamp where, you know, bacteria might go out of balance. If the bacteria in our body go out of balance, we've all heard about the gut bacteria and how important they are. They're a really integral part of the immune system. You know, we always hear like 80% of your immune system's in your gut. Yeah. You know, that's the first line of how things enter your body. So getting that right is kind of key. And you know, you may well not even have any gut issues. You might have something like a fungal nail infection that you don't even know that you've got some kind of yeast overgrowth in your gut because, you know, your gut's not playing up, but you might have other signs in other places. I know so many people that are fit and well that you look at them naturopathically, we have little clues, little visual clues to see what's going on, like in the nails and the tongue and various things on the body. And you can see that actually you might be saying, well, I'm fit and well, but there's signs that something's out of balance. So for me, it's looking at all of that, the whole body, the whole system, and finding out what's going wrong where and putting it, well, not wrong, but what's coming out of balance where, and enabling that back into balance through detoxification and through nutrition.
So for you, it's very much a case you don't want long COVID. Sort out all those little things that stop you feeling really good. So start feeling more like you did as a child, when you had full energy and your hair was shiny and you had no problems with your nails, rather than it's just because I'm getting old.
And you know, one final thing to say as well, two things actually. Old age is not an excuse for conditions like arthritis, and people are told that it is. It's actually an accumulation of toxicity. So, you know, if we're working on that, we shouldn't have these old age diseases. You know, I know people that are really fit and well into their 90s. But the other thing to say is that some people have never felt fit and well. You know, when you say feel like you did when you were a child, I mean, you inherit toxicity from your parents as well. And, you know, you can inherit trauma in the womb and all sorts of things, you know, like various kind of medications that I was given as a child, you know, that have kind of affected my system. And so I never felt fit and well. And so, you know, but that's your normal, so you don't know anything.
Seeing somebody like a good naturopathic nutritionist is a really good way to reduce your risk of contracting COVID and developing long COVID, pretty much.
And
well, technically I'm not allowed to say that, but I would say it's a good way to get your body back into balance.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
And another important thing is when we are told that something's waiting for us and we are in fear.
Oh,
absolutely.
That stress response.
That creates a sympathetic stress response, which will have an effect on the microcirculation. So our cells will suffer from a lack of oxygen and nutrients, and they will not be able to keep up with their normal metabolism. And more and more waste products will accumulate, and this adds to the situation.
And that beautifully leads us on to Patricia, the stress and traumas that we've mentioned, talking to B as well. In your experience, what do you think are the kind of the causes that people may not be aware of, predisposing you perhaps to long COVID?
Yeah, thank you. Well, you've all set me up beautifully. I think the missing piece here is long-term chronic stress. And stress isn't just the obvious things in your life that are stressful, although people often have these and don't realize, you know, they're juggling a lot. When we look at the demographic of people who are suffering long COVID, it tends to be, it's slightly younger than the risk factors for initial infection. So it's middle age, for anything from sort of teenage through to mid-50s. These are the years of stress. These are the years when we're juggling so many things. You know, we've got career pressures, we've got family pressures, and toxic stress is also impacted by your childhood as well and how you grew up. And I think B mentioned stress from trauma, you know, trauma in the womb, and that actually is an unbelievably big factor in a lot of these conditions, which is why some of us end up with chronic sort of low grade issues that we don't even regard as a problem until it becomes to such a level that it tips us over and we go into full-blown disease or some form of, you know, dysregulation. So adverse childhood experiences is a very new understanding. It's probably only been with us about 15, 16 years, where we notice that what happens to you as a child and even in the womb and even from conception actually affects the way you are physiologically regulated via your neuroendocrine system. So we're looking at a systems view of the body here. We're not just talking about bits that fail, like the gut might be compromised or you have brain fog, but what links all these things together is your neuroendocrine system and your microbiome. Actually, you have various systems that communicate to each other throughout the body. And the message of threat is actually translated physiologically at a cellular level, which both Rainer and B have mentioned, via something called the cell danger response. And that is where the mitochondria actually are shutting down and going to a much less efficient form of metabolism, which uses less oxygen, because obviously you're toxic, your cells are beginning to slow down, and it's actually to save your system from falling over completely. It actually gradually decreases your cellular output of energy. And it can be something that's been going on for years, because you've got this toxic burden of stress, unresolved emotional stress from abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, grief, bereavement, disconnection, sometimes attachment trauma, or trauma wounds from early childhood where your needs were not met. Unbelievably, these are stronger factors even than smoking or drinking to determine the state of health as an adult. And that was the ACE study done in 1998, and it's been corroborated by many other studies since. So we know that what happens to you in your early years has this incredibly strong, powerful program that determines your physiological response to stress, and it makes you much more hyper reactive to stress. So toxins in your environment, you're likely to be much more triggered by. For me, I grew up with migraines, just like Bea said, they were my normal. I would have them twice a month because my system is overwhelmed, my liver's not clearing properly, but I had no idea of that. I just thought it was normal. I'm very sensitive to changes in environment, heat, cold, smells, atmospheres even. You know, if people are angry or disconnected, I find it really disharmonious in my body, and I feel that. So, you know, we actually have these systems that pick up our environment and determine how we need to respond, but they can become oversensitized, and so they react in ways that are far too strong. And something like, you know, the coronavirus comes along and tips us into illness because we're already up here with our stress. You know, we're just under that threshold level that our body can just about keep us going, but all these signs and symptoms are an indication that we were already struggling. So I think it's understanding what happened to us in the past is not necessarily over as far as our body's concerned, and the fact that our mitochondria, which were bacteria that once long ago fused with an animal cell, are, like all bacteria, in communication with each other, and they sort of feed this information throughout the body that we are under stress and threat, and therefore functioning well is not so much important as survival, and it will shut you down into this sort of freeze level of response in order to keep you going, but with barely enough energy for functioning in your brain, your heart. You can sometimes get the heart palpitations. Your gut becomes dysfunctional because they're all high energy use systems. Your brain, your heart, your liver, and skeletal muscle, of course, is another one, which I think Rainer mentioned. But you can sometimes therefore get pain, fibromyalgia, where you're simply not producing enough energy to keep your muscles in relaxation. So it's a systems view, a dysregulation of your autonomic nervous system causing this downregulation of innate immunity. So that's my view.
That's brilliant. Again, we've got this picture of somebody who can possibly consider themselves well and healthy, but with these unknown experiences and their experience of normal actually being at this level of overstressed,
yes,
but without realizing it. So doing your therapy first, addressing your traumas, getting in touch with yourself. We also have, you highlighted again, the people are not aware of what's going on in their bodies. And I think that again comes down very much to socialization. No, you're fine. I know that I was going to the doctor for 20 years saying, I'm not well. I cannot function. I can't think. I'm in constant pain. I sleep and then I don't sleep, and had, in fact, a classic case of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, but it took 20 years for them to say, oh, well, it could be, I suppose. And so for 20 years, I ignored my body because my GP told me to.
Yeah, I think
and made it so much worse.
Their tests don't bring back anything positive. You don't have anything majorly wrong because you're not in major organ failure, and that's what the tests are looking for. So you'll be told
your
you're
liver
fine.
has to be in 80% organ
Yes.
failure pretty much before the NHS test will pick it up. So.
Yeah. So then they don't have a systems view. Yeah.
And that's the joy of functional medicine as well, is that when because I practice functional medicine as well, and so we don't look at, you know, one end or the other. You're either fit or you're diseased. You know, there's a whole shade of grey in between that can show that actually your body's not working optimally. You know, and that's what functional medicine looks like when we can do things like stool tests, we can do hormone tests, we can look at the thyroid function. Many kind of contentious kind of conversations about thyroid testing across the world really, and what is optimal thyroid function, and then what is the NHS definition of you have a thyroid disorder. So and the other thing I wanted to add in as well is that the other thing I hear as well is, well, I was fit and well, I was training, I was running marathons, I was doing cross-country running, and actually even that can be a stressor on your body when you are overtraining and you are pushing your body constantly, because when you train to that extent, it releases cortisol into your system, and again that's a stress response, and stress suppresses the immune system. So that was another thing I wanted to throw in about stress, really, because it doesn't just have to be emotional stress. It can be stress of what you're putting into your system, alcohol, certain foods, they can all be stressors. So yeah, don't just think of emotional stress, although obviously that can be a huge part, and one that people often ignore, but physical stress as well.
And the societal stress that we're under.
Stress, and as Ryan said about the fear, fear suppresses your immune system.
So Patricia and I have done a conversation, I think, in the past where we talked about it came into the conversation, the difference between fit, healthy, and well. And there are actually 3 important things to get all of them right. You can't be very well if you're very unfit, but you can actually be very fit and really not very well. So it's getting the balance right with everything.
I think that's something you kind of look at, isn't it, Carol? When you're dealing with people, you work more on the sort of physical tissue level, because I know you do myofascial release and coaching as well, don't you? So you kind of get people through to a viewpoint of what works and what doesn't. So, I mean, what would your approach be for someone coming with long COVID?
Yeah, as you say, I'm a very holistic therapist. I do massage, and then within that, there's a technique called myofascial release, which isn't actually massage, but it's profoundly effective at finding those hidden traumas within your body and giving your body the space by helping to release those stresses and those dysfunctional areas, should we say, and allowing your body to release those and then have the space within your body to then heal and recover. But when I have a long COVID, we take a very good history, of course, but there are common problems breathing, and most people sadly actually don't breathe well. So we talk about breathing and how to do breathing exercises and get into a habit of breathing better. Another is poor sleep, and massage has been proven through millions of studies to improve sleep quality when taken regularly with a therapist with whom you feel safe and secure. So to a certain extent, doesn't matter what type of massage you have, so long as you feel safe with the therapist, that's almost more important. And those are the 2 main sort of physical things, but I also look at people who are more prone to chronic exhaustive conditions across the board tend to be what we call an A-type personality, often where they put somebody else before themselves. That people pleasing, perfectionism, various other certain traits. And so through coaching, I help people, we go through and find out why they don't put themselves first, and just help them shift the way they think about self and the way they think about others. And it's amazing, even though they come to me perhaps for coaching purely for fatigue, the knock-on effect of the coaching to all of their relationships and all of their interactions, and basically the whole life improves and comes. They don't just start to feel better, they start to feel more better and more in balance than they were ever since they can remember, which is quite exciting. But referring, and we look at nutrition very briefly, if that's flagged, which nearly all it is, onto B, there is nearly always trauma, onto Patricia. And I know with seeing Rhino, we can enhance the effect of all the other therapies. So it is a fascinating area.
Yeah,
but it seemed very much to be that even though people on the whole seemed to consider they were fit, healthy and well, they got COVID, then they got long COVID. So they put it down to COVID. But that's a very similar story we hear with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. I was fit, healthy and well until the car accident, until the surgery, until the virus. That's what caused it. But it seems very much that they're very similar. There is a predisposition of imbalance, probably across the board, do we think? I don't think it's usually just one. I mean, if my nutrition and diet is perfect, that's unlikely to be the case if I have trauma, because there's going to be that dysfunction.
There won't be self-care if there's trauma. All right, there'll be self-abuse in some form or another, whether you're over-exercising, overeating, numbing. There won't be self-care, not appropriate self-care, because you've learned that you're not worthy of that.
And by numbing, you're talking about binge watching television, drinking, drugs, shopping, gambling, any of those habits which take your focus away from self.
Yeah. Overworking as well. I mean,
overworking.
That very common one, yeah.
I had that.
Workaholics. You do a bit.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one to shift, you know.
And especially for us with the need and the demand on us at the moment, saying actually, no, I have enough clients that day. If I see you, you're not going to get the best service, because I also need to look after self. We need to walk our talk.
And just one final thing really is you know, we're talking about post-viral fatigue here, and I think there's a massive fear attached to the fact that it comes from COVID. But bear in mind that post-viral fatigue has been around, you know, we go back to, I'm sure it's been around long before that. I think Florence Nightingale was the first recorded case, 1955, in the Royal Free Hospital. And I think we need to get away from, it's come from COVID, therefore it's, you know, it's intractable and there's nothing I can do about it, and this awful COVID thing has happened to me and therefore I've got this long COVID. And it's, you know, post-viral fatigue, it doesn't matter whether it's come from COVID or another virus, Epstein-Barr, or again, it's all about the body being out of balance.
Absolutely. And that blaming it on with the amount of fear around COVID is going to be so destabilizing to one's sense of hope and power over yourself to actually change things. And one thing that we are aware of is, though, that with the long COVID, as opposed to the chronic fatigue, is that we do have a higher instance of difficulty with breathing because of the stress on the lung, and a higher instance of heart palpitation, possibly due to the spike protein damaging the heart tissues, which you don't usually get at those levels in other post-virals and chronic exhaustive conditions. That's my understanding. So
some people do.
There are, I know I used to suffer really bad palpitations, so I know it does happen.
Yeah, not the lungs so much, but the heart issues can occur. But Rainer was going to just finish up, I think. What were you going to say, Rainer?
No, I just wanted to come back to where we started with hydration.
Mhm.
Oh,
When we look-
absolutely.
When we look at the tense muscles that are tense because of emotional or physical stress, we become dehydrated in those areas. And where you find all those myofascial problems, the thing you do with myofascial release is you enable the tissue to hydrate again.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize that water is a battery for life energy. And the
It's in our
more
car
hydrated
batteries.
we are, the better our cells will work at the end.
Absolutely.
And I think here we can really well see how everything comes together, meets in the structure of water or in the content of water of the body, because our brain needs, when we have tense muscles, our brain needs to work, or the nervous system needs to work a lot on balancing everything. And the more relaxed we become, the more relaxed our brain will be, causing less stress on the cells again. So everything is a kind of loop system where everything is connected.
The two most dehydrating things, stress and fear.
Yeah.
Mm.
And we have lived for the last 14 months with an incredible amount of those being placed on us. So, well,
Yeah.
does anybody else have one last point before we say thank you very much? Well, I'd like to thank you guys so much for your time. Pleasure talking to you, as it always is. I really hope that our viewers have enjoyed this. We are, you can find us at fatigue-free.me. And from there, you can find much more information on us to keep it in a quick nutshell for you. So thank you very much. And we hope you have a very good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.